Welcome in to the Lettermen Lounge, the Letterman Live Letterman Lounge crossover on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. It's Letterman Abound. Matt Parker on the other side of that screen. I'm Spencer Holbrook. And what we're going to do here, we're just going to spend an hour, 2 hours, maybe the entire day. Who's to say, Matt? Breaking down the 2024 Ohio State recruiting class, the wins, the losses, the almosts, the celebrations, the disappointments from Ohio State's 2024 recruiting class. 20 members of this class, all 20 of them have put pen to paper. Jeremiah Smith in the fold at 10 o'clock last night. Matt Parker was there to cover all of it. Matt, have you fully rested and recovered from National Signing Day yesterday on Wednesday?
I mean, I don't know if such a thing exists as ever fully rested when you do what we do, quite honestly. Um, I still got a couple bags under the eyes here. But you know what? We're gonna keep rocking and rolling, baby. Like I said yesterday to you, I mean, there's enough Folgers in the world to really just power through anything. Folger Stan out here. So but yeah, 10:02 yesterday. I actually texted you and Andy Backstrom and I said, okay, I'm gonna shut the laptop and you know what? We're just gonna wait until tomorrow. And then 10:02, I fire up the old Twitter and see that Ohio State football has announced that Jeremiah Smith officially signed. And as quickly as I shut the laptop, I opened it back up and got back to work. But yeah, man, yesterday was bananas. Yesterday was absolutely nuts. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's do this, Matt, because the thing about National Signing Day is, of course, everybody loves National Signing Day, but I mean, other than the guys actually signing, that's where the coverage for Lettermen Row just kind of begins, right?
Yep.
Because now it's not like, okay, the recruitments are over, as they say, the hay's in the barn, all it's left to do. So whatever phraseology you want to use, all that they do on National Signing Day is sign or flip or stick. And so, really, signing day is just that, signing day. Beyond that, now it becomes the can of worms that we dive into of, okay, what does this mean?
Yeah.
Because signing day is all about the celebration of these kids getting to this part of the journey. Now it's what does it mean? So today on lettermenrow.com, yours truly, I've got the top 3 recruiters coming. We'll maybe discuss that a little bit, but I don't want to spoil any announcements as we crown the recruiter of the year for Ohio State. I think you all know who it is. 5 instant impact Buckeyes who can help the roster as far as the team building side, the team side that Andy Backstrom and Tim May and I covered. But where do you see the coverage going for Lettermen Row? Just to give people a little bit of a behind the curtain peek. What do you got in the works, Matt? As far as the
Yeah.
impact of this recruiting class?
I mean, this morning I published a column about how Jeremiah Smith's signature capped off what I think should be looked at as a successful day for Ohio State on Wednesday. I mean, they kept 5-star edge rusher Edric Houston from flipping and signing to Alabama, which is absolutely big. 2 phone calls, one of which was during Ryan Day's press conference, which I'm sure we'll talk about that press conference, quite honestly, later in the show, but like also for the rest of our lives, because that was just wild. What happened at the Woody yesterday? Um, I mean, I that was big, so I'll have something about that as well. Uh, Also later today, and a lot of this stuff I'm going to try and sprinkle it throughout the week here as we move forward into the holiday season. Just to the folks watching, I have some time off coming up here as well, so a little peek behind the curtain for the folks there. Going to have some stuff coming out. I think later today. Uh, going to have position group grades. So I don't want to do any of that here. I will say already the wide receivers are going to be an A. So that is the tease right there. They'll be an A, bringing in 10 stars. So it's pretty good, I would say. Position group grades, both offense and defense. Um, an in-state analysis. Ohio State signed 3 of the top 5 Ohioans in the 2024 cycle, which 2 of them are corners, and both of those corners were wanted by Michigan. So the fact that A, Ohio State beat Michigan on the trail, and B, beat them for in-state guys is very important. So we're going to do a breakdown on that, and I'm sure a smattering of other things as I start to regain some semblance of being awake and being alert and everything like that. And we'll go from there, have some fun with it because this is fun.
Yeah, if you've got in the comments, if you've got grades that you think for Ohio State recruiting for each position, drop them down there, Matt. And I would love to see what fans think about these grades. I'm assuming there's going to be some harsh grades for the defensive line, but when you hold on to Edric Houston, it kind of makes up for a little bit of that. And I know that's not something Ohio State fans want to hear because 2 isn't enough. And, we talked about that a lot on Wednesday's show on the Rapid Reaction over on the Lettermen Row YouTube channel. If you haven't watched that yet, go watch that. There's a lot of people who have. And we did talk about the defensive line a lot. So we're not going to spend too much time on that just because that's kind of a topic that we covered. And then we'll get into it in the, of course, as we talk about the portal more, because now the attention on, especially on the defensive line, shifts to the transfer portal. But Matt, let's look at the top of this recruiting class. Jeremiah Smith, obviously, I don't want to say that there's not a lot to talk about with him because once he's signed, he's an instant impact guy. He's going to play right away. I said on Twitter that jokingly, but it's almost a thing that you would expect in the spring is they could have just announced his signing by saying his black stripe's been removed. I think that's going to come in the spring, like Carnell Tate's was, like Jelani Thurman's was. Other than him, though, the 5 stars, Mylan Graham, Jeremiah Smith, Edric Houston, and Aaron Scott, man, that's an impressive 5-star haul there. And I know Aaron Scott and Edric Houston are not 5 stars, according to, I think, any of the recruiting services. But when you do the industry breakdown and where they average, they become 5 stars because they're one of the top 32. But those 4 right there in the industry rankings, I'm really impressed with what Ohio State did because here's why, Matt, and I want your opinion on this. The last 4 or 5 years, the knock on Ohio State has been the offensive – the class, if you look at the class on 3, it looks offensive heavy. And to that point, the top 2 players in this class, according to the On3 industry rankings, are offensive players. They're both wide receivers, Jeremiah Smith and Mylan Graham. But you also bring in 2 defensive 5 stars, and that's something that we haven't seen a ton of in the last couple cycles, but I think you're seeing this staff get more comfortable recruiting together. And I think that's why you're seeing, the defensive recruiting really pick up again the way that we were used to seeing at Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ship got steered in the right direction in the 2023 cycle defensively. Just getting back to those big time guys, right? Like, I'm pretty sure Jermaine Matthews ended up being a 5-star by On3 when it was all said and done. And I'm pretty sure that was the only 5-star defensive guy Ohio State signed in the 2023 class. And then Tim Walton does it again and gets Aaron Scott in the class. But then Larry Johnson, for all the knocks against Larry Johnson right now, also Larry Johnson, and he got a 5-star edge rusher. Obviously, it's not enough, as we have said. It's certainly not enough, especially when this is a class that was wanting to sign, 5 or 6 guys. Well, you're 3 or 4 short, but you brought in a 5-star. So I don't know, man. It's a delicate balance right there. And I think it's kind of leaning more toward, for me anyway, it's leaning more toward what you didn't do rather than what you did do. But recognizing what you did do is very, very impressive, especially when Nick Saban was calling it the, 11th hour to say, hey, look, come play here. I don't know. It's certainly going in a direction, in a holistic viewpoint, I would say, going in the right way. And I don't think there's any reason why to be upset that, Ohio State is bringing in good talent. That is the case. I always feel like when, we're talking about this stuff, it's always like, well, what didn't you do? What didn't you do? What didn't you do? And quite frankly, after a while, that gets kind of bogs you down a little bit, and we're gonna, we do that, we are critical. That is our job, is to be critical. But I also feel like part of our job is to highlight what went right, like what they did do right. And Ohio State has had a dynamic offense for however many years Ryan Day has been the head coach at Ohio State, and quite honestly, the offensive coordinator at Ohio State as well. And that allows Ohio State to go out and get 5-star wide receivers and 5-star quarterbacks and everything like that. Now, there is a conversation to be had about the fact that, they can't get that elite offensive tackle or something like that. And we'll get into the offensive line class in a minute here, talking about the 4 guys that they did bring in. But I like the running backs that they brought in too. I really like James Peoples a lot. I really like him a lot. So things are going from a holistic standpoint. Things are going in the direction that I think they should. And we talked about this yesterday on the rapid reaction after Ryan Day's press conference that it's not as bad as it seems. Like Ohio State, like there's been such a negative funk about Ohio State ever since it lost to Michigan, which I mean, rightfully so. There was mediocre quarterback play the entire year at Ohio State, which is something that Ohio State fans haven't seen in I don't know how long. Honestly, at this point, like it's kind of ridiculous the run that Ohio State has had at the position, and Ohio State's 37 yards away from being more likely than not 13-0 and going to the college football playoff in a few days from now. But that's not the case. What was the case was there's been the funk that's been around the program because of losing to Michigan. And then, the transfer portal has opened up and it's been all about, well, this guy's in the portal. Why isn't Ohio State pursuing them? And there's so many unknowns. But we got 20 known facts yesterday. And I think that deserves
FAX.
FAX. That's right. I didn't even really think about that. Like I said, man, it's been a long couple of days here. And that deserves to be celebrated. That deserves to be celebrated. So kind of rambling there, as I do on this show. As folks kind of rambling there. But the point is, yes, there's more that Ohio State needs to get done, specifically looking at the defensive side of the ball. And the defensive staff is starting to gel together. And that's why we are seeing these recruitments from a holistic standpoint, from a whole total point of view, go Ohio State's way. There's more to be desired in the defensive line, certainly, even at safety position. And they signed a top 150 prospect yesterday with Jalen McClain, but there's more to be desired at the safety position. And it also helps that Ohio State's defense is actually pretty good now. I think kids are starting to see that. And I am really, really intrigued how the 2025 cycle goes for Ohio State. But I don't want to think about 2025 right now. So
of the top 8 players on the Ohio State board who signed yesterday, according to the On3 industry ranking, 4 of them on defense, 4 of them on offense. I think the top of the class is very balanced. There's a linebacker in there. There's a corner. There's the defensive end. And then on the offensive side, there's 2 wide receivers. There's a running back, and then there's a quarterback. That I did not mention offensive line, but I am on the record right now saying that I think this offensive line class is severely underrated. I actually really like what Justin Fry and the group did in this class. Obviously, there's some meat left on that bone. They were in on guys like a Gerby Lambert who ends up at Notre Dame. They were in on guys like a Jordan Seaton who we have no clue where he's going to go, but I think they avoided a lot of unneeded drama by that recruitment not going their way. They were in on a couple other guys just in this class that could have gone their way and could have made this offensive line class even better. But it is what it is at this point with the offensive line class. And that's not to say that Ohio State settled, but I always reserve judgment on the offensive line class because you just don't know how guys are going to develop. If you looked at that 2020 class or what year? I think 2019 class, people were down on some of the guys at the bottom of that recruiting class, including a 3-star kid from Indiana who was a basketball player. And right now he's his season's over, but he's one of the best offensive tackles, rookie offensive tackles in the NFL for the Cleveland Browns, and that's DeJuan Jones. And he developed at Ohio State into that. So it's hard to pass judgment on an offensive line class on signing day. Obviously, it's better to work with 5 stars than it is 3 stars because the baseline level of talent is different. But I think that's where this conversation should go because it's one of those groups that you look at on paper. Obviously, you look at wide receiver. Oh, my gosh, Jeremiah Smith, Mylan Graham, you fall in love. You look at corner, you're going to fall in love. We're going to cover all of that. But if you just look up and down the class, you're going to look at the offensive line and think, there's some meat left on that bone. But I think that Justin Fry and the Buckeyes found the right pieces for this class, and I do like what they've done. A couple developmental pieces and a couple pieces they think they can really, really push and work with here.
Yeah, I mean, with what they signed, the class starts and ends with Ian Moore, right? 6'6", 315, from New Palestine, Indiana. And we saw him play in September, and he admitted to us, so we can go out and say it, that the first quarter of the game that we saw him play was not his best football, but the second, third, and fourth quarter was some of the best football that I've ever seen from an offensive lineman. I mean, just you talk about clamps. I know that's a basketball term, right? But as it applies to football, I mean, yeah, like there's a reason why he's going to Ohio State. And he, committed early. He was the first commit in the Ohio State 2024 class. I'm not going to count Dylan Raiola in this because he's not in the class. So, he doesn't count. Ian Moore committed in October of 2022 and, you know, shut it down. I mean, Notre Dame tried to enter the picture, and Ian grew up a Notre Dame fan, and he was like, yeah, no, I'm going to Ohio State. That's where I want to be. Love Justin Fry, love Mike Soleni, Ryan Day, Brian Hartline, all of them. And then you see a late bloomer like Gabe Van Sickle, who 6'5", 310, 315, going to start out as a guard when he gets to Ohio State, can play center. He's not going to be an early enrollee. He actually just started his basketball season not too long ago out there in Coopersville, Michigan. And the thing about all four of these guys, and that's not to forget, by the way, the Armstrong twins, Deontay and Devontae from Lakewood St. Ed's up there in the Cleveland area. All four of these guys fit what Ohio State wants to do schematically, which is a lot of zone movement. These guys are athletic enough to do that. And that's a big reason why Ohio State targeted these guys. They signed them. They're bringing them into the program. And it's super, super, super big that three of those four are going to be on campus in January, especially the Armstrong twins, because typically you don't see a lot of guys from private schools, the Catholic schools, enroll early for whatever reason. They just that it doesn't happen. But the twins are going to be at Ohio State in January, and that is very big for Ohio State, and it's big for them. It allows them to get their career started early. They can get in the weight room with Mickey Marotti and really get after it. Start to really fill out those frames that Ohio State saw on the trail and recognized. Hey, because at this time a year ago, I mean, maybe even a little bit before this time a year ago, but they looked like, I mean, tight ends and linebackers, and now you see what Ohio State saw down the road. That I mean, you see guys that they have the body, they just have to work it. They have to put the weight on, they have to put the muscle on, and everything like that. And I saw the Armstrongs play September. I think it was in September. Um, they played Good Counsel from Maryland, and they played up in Lakewood. And Good Counsel has, I mean, they have a very good football team. Uh, on that defense is four-star edge rusher Darian Mayo, who signed with Clemson yesterday, and he didn't give the Armstrongs any problems anytime that he went up against them. And as a matter of fact, in that second half of that game, Good Counsel defense stopped putting Mayo on the Armstrong side of the ball. So, like, the talent is there, the potential is there. It's just development, which offensive line is, that's one of the biggest positions where development has to happen. And I think the proof is kind of in the pudding for what Justin Fry can do as a coach when you look at what happened at the start of the Ohio State 2023 season versus what happened at the end of the 2023 season. Part of that, I think, kind of comes with schematic changes as well, and recognizing what this offensive line can and can't do, which is just as important as developing guys, quite honestly, because you'll hear coaches all the time say, oh, well, we have to coach ourselves. And Ohio State wasn't doing that for the first 6 weeks of the season, in my opinion. And then they did, and Ohio State all of a sudden could run the ball. So, like, explain that to me. I know I don't cover the team, but I'm around the team as much as you guys are. So, like, I see the same things, and I'm just like, okay, well, now this makes sense. They changed things up. But now they're recruiting the guys that fit what they want to do. And that's super important. You know, with the 2023 class, we saw Luke Montgomery get some playing time, his freshman year. But I mean, they're really excited with the development of Austin Sareveld and Josh Padilla. And, we haven't heard too much about Miles Walker, but that was a big flyer, in my opinion. He looks the part, but they got to get him there. And as it relates to the 2024 class, like, man, I think Ohio State fans should be pretty excited about especially Ian Moore. I mean, he's a really good football player, and he's excited to work with Justin Fry and Mike Soleni. I mean, so are the Armstrongs, and Gabe Van Sickle was a late find, originally committed to Northwestern, and I mean, Northwestern is pretty good at developing offensive linemen and sending them to the NFL as well. So, like, that's not a knock against Northwestern football that Ohio State flipped the kid from Northwestern. Like, that's a good get. So, and yeah, I mean, you said it. The Jordan Seatons of the world, and the Gerby Lamberts and Brandon Bakers of the world, they're not going to Ohio State. Okay, they're not. So someone asked us yesterday at Ryan Day's press conference if there is a need to expand, and this is more geared toward the defensive line, but I'm going to twist this to fit what we're talking about now. Is there a need to have a wider net as it relates to defensive line? That was the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that can also be true of the offensive line. Ohio State is swinging for the top guys, as it should, because Ohio State is the top program in college football. But like, you look at a guy like at William Satterwhite, who just signed with Tennessee, but is from Akron Archbishop Hoban, and you go back and should Ohio State have done a second evaluation? Like, there's a lot of questions to be asked about a lot of things, quite honestly, as it relates to recruiting in the trenches. But with the four guys that are heading to Ohio State, the potential is there. The talent for a couple of them is already there. Now it's just making something with the ingredients, and that's part of the fun.
I really like Gabe Van Sickle. I really do. I think that he's a swing guy who's versatile. He's athletic. Ohio State loves the way, you hear like draft guys and football guys say, like, he has great bend. He does this well. He does that well. I think that all of those traits can be applied to Gabe Van Sickle. And to the wider net, of course, you could have looked at William Satterwhite. You could have tried to get back in on Brandon Baker when Nebraska was trying to get back in on him here and Oregon was trying to get back in on him. You could have probably contacted Jordan Seaton if you think it's worth it. But I actually think Ohio State did a really good job. Once it's very apparent that Brandon Baker is sticking with Texas, once it's very apparent that Jordan Seaton is maybe not worth the juice is not worth the squeeze there when it comes to the drama that was going to be filled, still is ongoing with his recruitment. The Buckeyes pivoted pretty well, and they find a guy who you turn on the junior tape, you turn on the senior tape, you won't recognize Gabe Van Sickle. He really progressed as a senior. Those are the kind of finds that have made the Ohio State offensive line really good. They did it with Josh Fryer. They did it with and I think Fryer got better as the year went on. Not maybe didn't take the steps that you wanted him to, but got better. They expanded the net last year when they got Josh Simmons in the spring window after missing on the guys in the winter window, the transfer portal. And you saw the way Josh Simmons looked in game 1. I thought he was really bad, to be honest. And by game 12, he was probably their best offensive lineman. So, like,
I would definitely say he was. Yeah.
Not only the development there, but the way that the Buckeyes have kind of gone back in and, okay, where do we need to reevaluate some guys? And maybe that's not the William Satterwhites, who I also agree should have been in a guy that they at least looked at and maybe tried to flip. But on the offensive line, I think they've done a really good job. They identified Ian Moore early. Everyone always knew that the Armstrongs were a known commodity. So that's one that you kind of have to go get. But the Buckeyes saw, and I'm not bashing the Michigan recruiting class whatsoever. The Buckeyes evaluated a couple other guys in the state of Ohio that ended up at Michigan. And, like a Luke Hamilton, like a Ben Roebuck, who I like both of those players. But the Buckeyes evaluated those guys and said, that's okay. I know they're in state, but that's okay. We're going to do other things on the offensive line recruiting. Didn't panic when Brandon Baker committed elsewhere. Didn't panic when it looked like Jordan Seaton was not going to go their direction, and they went out and they found a Gabe Van Sickle. And I give a lot of credit to Ohio State for doing that and finding a guy who, once Ohio State gets involved, the scouts look back at this kid and say, okay, what is Ohio State seeing? And then he gets that ratings bump. That's not necessarily a Buckeye bump. It's just like, okay, if one of the top 5 programs in America is looking at this kid, maybe we should reevaluate. And now you're seeing that rating for Gabe Van Sickle go up. And so I think that they did a nice job with Justin Fry and Ryan Day. And I'm not carrying water for these guys. I don't have to. They make $1 million a year. They don't need me to do that on a YouTube channel. But I think they're doing a good job of when they see, that things might not be going in their direction. They don't panic. They don't throw out a courtesy offer to a kid in Ohio that they don't think can cut it. They go out and they find a player. And they found Josh Simmons in the transfer portal last year. They didn't panic this year, and they found Gabe Van Sickle, and I think it's working out in their direction right now.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing, it's all potential right now, right? That's the thing. It's what you see. It's what Ohio State sees on tape, and then the potential of being great at the next level. And, I mean, you mentioned it. You throw on Gabe Van Sickle's tape, and, that's a man with bad intentions. And Ohio State needs more of that on its offensive line. There were times this year where I thought Ohio State's offensive line was maybe a little too passive. They just didn't seem super aggressive at times, which is not great when you're an offensive line. You want to be known for Ohio State as they want to be known as being tough. Ryan Day had a fit on national television at Lou Holtz, which is an all-time Ohio State moment, by the way, questioning the program's toughness. And at times, I didn't think the offensive line was super aggressive, was super great. But Ohio State's bringing in guys right now to fix that. And, that's super important as well. It has to be, there are a lot of things that go into it. Part of the equation, the largest part of the equation, of course, is can they play football? Yes. Okay. Boom. That checks off the biggest box. That's the obvious thing. But part of it is also the mental side of the game. If they make a mistake in a game, because Ohio State, I mean, every program in the country, they don't watch the highlights, they watch the entire game. That's the scouting department at every FBS school, Power 5, Group 5, it doesn't matter. They spend so many hours watching full games of high school football players. I would not want that job at all. I would not want that job. That's tough. What I am getting at here is the makeup of getting guys and taking guys is the mental aspect is a big part of it as well. And, if they make a mistake, do they make the same mistake twice? Are they checked in when the game is, 49-7 in a good way, 49-7 in a bad way, and stuff like that. That stuff shows on film. It shows up in conversations when you talk to people, because it doesn't even have to be about football. You can talk to someone about anything, and if you pick up on it, you're going to understand, okay, that's who this person is. Recruiting the culture is a big thing for Ohio State. Recruiting their culture is a big thing as well, and that's all 20 of those guys that are in the class, and those 4 particularly in the offensive line. Not only do they represent what the culture is, but they represent what Ohio State wants the culture to be moving forward. And I think you look at all 20 of those guys, and they all have their own story and their own, in their own thing and whatever. And they're just a really good representation of what Ohio State is. And something that this just made me think of this, by the way. So right now, as it stands, and I haven't checked this morning, but I'm assuming it's still the case, Ohio State has the number 3 class in the country, according to the On3 Team Industry rankings. They signed 20 kids and have the number 3 class. Georgia, who has the number 1 class, signed 26, 27, something
20,
like that.
28 commits.
Okay, and Alabama's number 2, and how many do they
have? 25.
Okay, so Ohio State has 20 and has the number 3 class in the country. What does that tell you about the quality of player that's going to Ohio State? And I understand that, it is a little skewed because, the top 2 guys are wide receivers, but you mentioned the top 8, it's an even split. It's 4-4. And then you go down and you look at the thing and everything like that, and having 20 guys sign and still having the number 3 class is pretty impressive, Spence.
Yeah, the per player average for Ohio State is third behind Georgia, Alabama. They're ahead of Texas A&M. They're definitely far ahead of Miami. Miami signs 27 guys. The top end looks really good, but you look at the bottom of the roster, and that's how you build the depth of these rosters. And I think that's lacking there for the Canes. So Ohio State doing a really good job. And again, like we said this yesterday in the video, we're not trying to blow smoke here. Like there are areas where deficiencies are. I'd love for some folks to get in the comments here, have some recruiting questions. Right now, the comments are arguing about Kyle McCord and Devin Brown, but that's what comment sections do. But I would love to see some recruiting questions. We'll answer any of them. So we love the comments, even the trolls. We're definitely watching these comments, but they're fun to watch as they roll in. But if you have any questions, throw them down in there. We'd love to talk. Anything you guys want to talk about. But Matt, let's transition here. Good. That's a good discussion.
I just figured out how to look at the comments. I haven't done a live here, so I'm going back and looking at the comments here. Keep it going though with what you were going to say. Sorry.
Yeah, let's switch gears here. Okay. Because defensive line, there's not really a lot to talk about. I think Edric Houston's going to play in year one. I think Eric Mensah is a developmental piece that I think could be good down the road. He's one of those guys that Ohio State targets who's toolsy. It has the tools that you need to be good, but isn't necessarily a guy that you're going to see play like early in his Ohio State career. And I could be wrong about that. He could be a guy who surprises. But Matt, I want to talk about the secondary and not just the cornerback class, but the safety class, because it's going to sound like trying to pump sunshine when in reality it's not really pumping sunshine. I think Ohio State really likes Leroy Roker. They feel like he's a guy that was under-recruited by and large by most of college football. So they go target him and make sure that he's a part of the class. They get Jalen McLean, who I've had a source, a top Ohio State source of mine tell me that they think Jalen McLean has that Malik Hartford potential to play really early in his Ohio State career. Watch him on special teams. He could be up there. And he's not in my newly released 5 instant impact Buckeyes because I think there's just a lot of variance that comes with, do you play on special teams? Can you play on defense? And there's a few other guys I think could play earlier. But like this secondary class, Aaron Scott and Bryce West are what they are. Like they are top level corners on par, I think, with Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt from last year. Miles Lockhart, if you watch this film, he reminds me of what Jordan Hancock looked like in high school. So like the cornerback class is there, and Tim Walton's doing an incredible job. He's definitely going to be one of the top recruiters when we do the recruiting list later on Thursday. But I think just as a system, and I think Perry Eliano could be better on the recruiting trail with these top guys. We'll say
absolutely. That. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I completely agree.
But when you look at what they're doing overall as recruiting the secondary as a group of 5, not a group of 5 level, but like a group of the 5 guys in the secondary, you see a vision for what they want the secondary to be. And I think the recruiting fits the vision of what they want it to be, but I don't think that it's at the level that it should be in one spot, and that's probably the deep safety position.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State, let's be real about it, right? Ohio State, at the start of the Jim Knowles era, they called it a safety-driven defense. That's what they called it. And when you can't bring in elite safeties into a safety-driven defense, that's not good. Like that, I'm just being honest. That's not good. How are you going to bring in the best players in the country in a defense that favors them? Now, I'm on the notion that if Ohio State had a good game against Michigan in 2022, Caleb Downs would be a Buckeye. I have that feeling. That's just my take. But that didn't happen. How it happened, who's to say? I don't know. I just cover recruiting. That's all. But yeah, I mean, Leroy Roker was being recruited by Iowa. Which Iowa, I mean, they find these guys. Iowa does a good job of scouting overlooked guys and developing them into NFL talent. Perry Eliano, I mean, he developed Sauce Gardner at Cincinnati into a first-round draft pick, but that was a corner. Can he develop safeties? That's the question. And we're seeing, I mean, that's happened. I mean, Lathan Ransom, if he stays healthy, who knows what the rest of his season looks like at Ohio State. Sonny Styles is what Sonny Styles is. I mean, I'll be super honest with you. That guy could probably play every single spot on the defense with his frame. Weight fluctuate. He could cut or add like a wrestler does, quite honestly. He'd be great at every spot. To me, the biggest thing to look at development for Ohio State with its current secondary coaches are the freshmen that played this year. And that was Malik Hartford, who started a game. Now, granted, maybe some of that was injury related. And but the thing is okay, hang on. I just saw this in the comment. The big question is, how can you not land your cousin at your position group at Coach Eliano, Mello number 7? I don't know if that's a Carmelo Anthony thing or whatever, but anyway, I digress, as someone else said in the comments. Yeah, like that's a question. How can you not land someone that you have a personal relationship with, right? Like that's a frustrating thing. There you go. Yeah. How can you not land someone that you have a personal? I'm getting there. Hang on, don't cut me off. I got it. Other things are in factor in recruitments. NIL is a thing in recruitment, and you hear that talked about on every single Ohio State recruiting show of all time. Yes, Ohio State is not going to make high school freshmen the highest paid players. That's how Ohio State didn't get KJ Bolden. It's that simple. That's why Florida State had him committed, but then Georgia at the last second swooped in, and now all of a sudden you're seeing these magical stories on signing day that Florida State doesn't really have the money. So I'm just telling you how it is. They're not going to offer big old bags of cash to kids that haven't played a down of college football. Whether that's right or not, I'm not the one to make that call, but I am the one that's going to call it how I see it, and that's what happened there. So I hope that answers the question. Back to Leroy Roker.
Well,
yeah, he's a big flyer, and like you got to hope that it pans out. That's really all it is. You just got to hope that what you saw on tape pans out. I mean, Mark Pantoni on Twitter yesterday said that his tape had shades of Malik Hooker. That's an awfully big comparison for a kid that has only started playing football seriously going into his senior year of high school. So I'm very critical of the safety position because I want it to be good, because you want things to be good. So it's a little bit easy to cover. Like that's the truth of the reality here. When things are good, it's a little bit easier to get information and things like that, because coaches are happier to talk about stuff. You know, people are happier to share information. But when you're hoping on guys to work out, that's not the direction you want to be if you're Ohio State. Now, there's no such thing as like a surefire bet when it comes to high school recruiting, even with Jeremiah Smith. Now, he is as close to a surefire thing as you could possibly imagine. But if you're Ohio State, you can't sign guys hoping they pan out. Like you just can't do that. So, but that's where Ohio State's at with the safety position. Now, that's to say, unless you had something else that you wanted to add, but I was going to circle to Jalen McLean, who I think is a very good player.
Yeah, I do, because we got a question here. Okay. Do we really think Edric Houston will play in year one? Since Day has been here, that hasn't happened. Well, it does pertain to the secondary, because I'm not going to be critical here, but Zach Harrison started games as a true freshman in 2019. Lathan Ransom started the Big Ten championship game in 2020 for Ohio State as a true freshman. In 2021, JT Tuimoloau was only on campus for 2 months and then played more than 20 snaps against Minnesota in the season opener and had a big role in 2021. 2022, Sonny Styles is a true freshman at 17 years old, started in the Peach Bowl against Georgia in the College Bowl playoff semifinal. Carnell Tate had over 20 catches this year as a true freshman at the wide receiver position, the same amount of catches as Garrett Wilson had in 2019 with head coach Ryan Day from the wide receiver position. Jack Sawyer played a little bit as a true freshman. Tyleik Williams had a big impact as a true freshman. Mike Hall played a little bit during his true freshman season.
Caden McDonald this year?
Caden McDonald played a little bit as a true freshman. In 2022, Jair Brown started games as a true freshman. J.K. Johnson had games where he played in 2021 as a true freshman. Jordan Hancock, the only reason he didn't is because he enrolled late and then had to develop and had a couple injuries here and there. Julian Fleming in 2020 had injuries, but he still played as a true freshman at wide receiver. In 2023, Jermaine Matthews and Malik Hartford both started games in the secondary as true freshman. The notion that Ohio State does not play young guys is one of the crazier notions that I have ran into in my 5 years. Next year will be my 6th year on the beat. I've covered this team since Ryan Day took over. I did not cover any Urban Meyer teams. I will tell you, more true freshmen play under Ryan Day than they did under Urban Meyer. And there's a thing about, well, CJ Hicks didn't play as a true freshman. Well, linebacker's hard to play. Linebacker is a hard position to play. Well, this guy didn't play as a true. Guys, Ohio State puts a lot of freshmen in big-time roles. Malik Hartford was on the field for 1 snap against Michigan. Michigan targeted him and scored a touchdown. Like, it's hard for true freshmen to play. So I don't mean to be critical of the folks watching. I love the folks who watch. But, like, when you look at the amount of true freshmen who play for Ohio State, Brandon Ennis played almost every game. Arvell Reese played on special teams for Ohio State this year, despite getting there in the summer. Like, the amount of true freshmen who are playing for Ohio State is pretty staggering for a team trying to win a national championship. And Jalen McClain, I'll get you there, could be next.
Well,
because
I have a
we've already heard.
I want to piggyback off of what you're talking about now. Ohio State also has a pretty unique situation in the last couple of years where guys are staying, and maybe that's a development thing. Maybe it's more likely than not a development thing. And maybe that's why you're not seeing, like, there are programs across the country, like even some of the big boys like Alabama and Georgia, like, yeah, like they're playing probably more freshmen than Ohio State does, but like Ohio State is a veteran team, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either. That gives good practice reps, good mental reps for younger guys. Obviously, game reps are the thing that are most important, but like you can't rush a development. That's the biggest thing. You can't rush a development, because if you put a kid in a spot and he's not ready, that's going to cost you 6 points, like it did against Michigan. So, and the question at hand, I think, with Edric is not about, will he play for Ryan Day? Will he play in his first year for Larry Johnson? That's the biggest thing. And, NFL decisions are still yet to be made or announced, I should say. I don't know what's going on for JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. If they come back, what happens for Edric Houston? Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry are in the wings, ready to go, no matter what the two starters from this past season decide to do. So it'll be interesting. But Ohio State is counting on Edric Houston to play. Like Ryan Day said so in his press conference once the facts cleared. So if that's the expectation when a guy, signed his letter of intent, I think it's pretty telling to say that Ohio State has plans for him to play. If that's the expectation on signing day, I mean, I don't know. We'll see. I don't know everything, Mm-hmm. I know more what I don't know than what I do know, But I would like if Edric Houston played. I think that'd be awesome because he's a very good football player. But Ohio State has better, more experienced football players. And that's the fact.
I really like what Ohio State did, and this is going to sound weird. I like what Ohio State did on special teams this year with Jermaine Matthews and Calvin Simpson-Hunt. When Calvin Simpson-Hunt was finally ready to play, they not only put him in the game in the third quarter on defense, but they also played him a lot on special teams to get the speed of the game. And then when he does get in there on defense against like a Purdue, he blows up a screenplay with 3 offensive linemen coming right at him. So like you saw that development there late in the season with Calvin Simpson-Hunt. You saw Jermaine Matthews, on the field for big-time moments this year. You saw Brandon Ennis on special teams, and then he gets in the game against Purdue, he scores a touchdown. So, like, you're getting some good movement there from special teams to the defensive side of the ball, from special teams into the offensive equation. I think that's going to be the same path that you see this secondary class take next year. There's not a lot of room, in my opinion, for a guy like an Aaron Scott, even a 5-star, with the way that this room is constructed right now, for him to get on the field as a true freshman in the defense, for a Jalen McClain to get on the field as a true freshman in the defense. But if Aaron Scott and Jalen McClain are your gunners on special teams, And then all of a sudden you see them out there in blowout, and then all of a sudden you see them out there in the third quarter in November, and then you see them out there for special teams in the college football playoff next year, you're going to say, okay, those freshmen are coming on. And it doesn't have to be on defense. But that's where
that's a big Urban Meyer thing. You know,
I love
up.
what those guys are doing in that secondary right now. The way that they're not only recruiting, but the way that they set these guys up for success by putting them in positions as true freshmen in the secondary, which is hard to trust guys.
Yeah.
Tim Walton and Perry Eliano are showing you that they have big plans for the future of this secondary by what they're doing with them as true freshmen. And I think you're going to see the same thing apply to Aaron Scott and Bryce West and Miles Lockhart and Jalen McClain and possibly Leroy Roker.
I think the biggest, point of evidence to that claim is Jermaine Matthews. Look at what he did when he got his opportunity as a true freshman, against Big Ten competition. I thought he held his own against Purdue. I thought he was pretty solid against Purdue. And he had, now I understand it's Western Kentucky, but also understand he's an 18-year-old kid playing college football for the first time in Ohio Stadium, and he scores a pick six, against a veteran guy. So the notion that good things are happening, development is happening, especially at the secondary position, where the secondary position since, oh gosh, Spence, I mean, how long do you want to go back? The last time you could say that BIA was actually a real thing, because it hasn't been for however many years. And now it's creeping back that way. And it's because of the guys that they're recruiting. And it's because of the development that's happening. Denzel Burke, I mean, look at the season he had. No one threw the ball his way, man. And that's exactly what's happening with the development of these young guys. And then you bring in a 6'2" Aaron Scott, who's going to be on campus in January. Come on. Ohio State's trending right now for Devin Sanchez, the 5-star 2025 cornerback who's committing on January 6th. I think that's going to go Ohio State's way. Dorian Brew is a 6'2" cornerback from Texas, played in Dayton, moved back to Texas. They're trending for him. I mean, it's ridiculous. The things that are happening for Ohio State on the trail, you're seeing it directly show up in games. And it's only 2 years of Tim Walton at the cornerback position. There is more to be desired for the safety position. There certainly is. And I think there needs to be more. You need to see more. I think part of that starts with recruiting guys earlier, getting on guys earlier. In the 2025 cycle, Ohio State, in my opinion, Ohio State's recruiting their top safety target, Fahim Delane, as hard as they did any of their 2024 targets. And that's a cycle behind. That's how it has to be moving forward. And not just at safety position, but at all of the positions. That's how you get guys in the fold. That's how you build those relationships that Ohio State still wants to have their recruitments be centered around. And that's how you win. You get in early, you get in, recruit kids as hard as possible. And that's how it goes. But now I'm getting, now I'm getting a little fired up. So let's talk about the mess that was defensive line, because it was a disaster. It absolutely was. It was. When you're expecting to sign 5 or 6 guys and you bring in 2, that's not good. So that's my take.
Okay, so let's do this. Right now, as the roster stands, with only 2 defensive linemen committed or signed, with only 2 guys signed, Ohio State is still almost at the scholarship limit. And I have a roster tracker in a Google Sheet because I love Google Sheets. I use Excel and Google Sheets. Yeah, I'm a nerd. I use Excel and Google Sheets for everything. I have the roster tracker. Ohio State wants to be at 8 defensive ends and 8 defensive tackles. I know that the recruiting has looked bad the last 2 years, but if JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer come back, even if Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams both leave, Ohio State will be at around 8, depending on numbers, 8 defensive ends and 8 defensive tackles on the roster. So when you look at the scholarship number after losing 14 guys to the transfer portal, and you look at the current roster and who will be on the roster in the spring for defensive linemen, Ohio State is where it wants to be and has to be as far as just sheer scholarship allotment for what it wants defensive linemen to be at. With that being said, Matt, and I'm going to kind of unleash you here.
Oh, yeah, I'm ready to go, man.
With that being said, that is a veteran-heavy group. And JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer are going to have to come back. Because if they don't, then you're looking at Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry, and guys who have never played before. If you don't get Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton back, or Ty Hamilton and Mike Hall back, which I think Ty Hamilton, I don't think he has a decision, but if you don't get Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams back, you are looking at Ty Hamilton and then hoping on projecting Tywone Malone to be good, and then a Caden McDonald and some guys that you're just not really sure about. Even Hero Canoe, you're just not really sure down to down how good he's going to be. The group is where it needs to be numbers-wise. The entire roster is pinched right now because they're looking at 83, 84. Ryan Day said it yesterday, and he knows his roster better than anybody, including you and I. But
I hope he knows it better than you and I.
But the youth of the defensive line room is not good enough right now. And even with Edric Houston, let's give a huge pat on the back to Ryan Day, to Larry Johnson, to whoever powers that be that need not be named, for getting the deal done with Edric Houston. But it's not good enough. And now I cede my time to the senator from Ohio.
My biggest thing is when it's very well known what Ohio State wants to do on the recruiting trail, and it doesn't get it done at a position where it's been lacking the last now 3 cycles, because 2021 is all those veteran guys that you just talked about are from 2021, right? And now that 5 or 6 was the case because Ohio State was expecting all of those guys to leave. And now there's uncertainty in the air about that's why if you're going to have any pushback to what I'm going to say, it's this. Those guys are the decision is yet to be made, yet to be announced, however you want to say it. Okay. If anyone on the Ohio State beat knows of what these guys are going to do, I'm going to say that they don't. Like, I'm just putting my foot in the ground there. JT, is he going to come back or not? Do I think he should? Probably. I think he needs more time. I think Jack Sawyer, who came on late, I think he played his best 2 games as an Ohio State Buckeye against Minnesota and against Michigan. He needs to come back. Tyleik Williams, he certainly put himself into, NFL draft conversation, but I think there's more meat on the bone. Mike Hall has had, injury problems the last 2 seasons for Ohio State. If they get all of those guys back, then you know what? I'm not going to say it's okay, but it's a 1-year fix for a problem that has existed for now 3 years. And that's where 2025, there is no exception to missing on guys. There is no excuse. You have to get your guys. You have got to land your guys. You have to expand the board. It can't just be these top end guys that are going to places because schools are paying them. You have to dig a little deeper. You have to recruit a little bit harder. That's where the questions from other schools about Larry Johnson retiring come in. That's why that works for kids. That's why Edric Houston almost flipped to Alabama on signing day. The youth is not great. From a logistical standpoint, the defensive line is exactly where it needs to be. Yes, I agree with you. Because disagreeing with numbers and logic would be kind of silly, in my opinion.
Well, it's just a fact, right? Like, they have the numbers they need for 24, but this is a down the road problem, which is why it's fair to call it a disaster like you did, Matt.
Because it is. Because my whole life, my whole job is to look down the road. That's all I do is look down the road. I don't get to enjoy what's currently there. I'm all about, okay, what's next? And that's how I have to look at this. And already one of Ohio State's top edge rushers is committed to Alabama in the 2025 cycle. Javian Hilson. Yeah. From Cocoa High School, which is a school that Ohio State has Cedric Hawkins from. Javen Boggs in the 2025 class. Like Ohio State has good relationships with that school. But you see an edge rusher commit to Alabama, and that's because he's not getting talked to by Ohio State. And that's the issue. That's the issue. You've got to be on these kids because it's a different world. These kids, they want to be wanted. I've had kids throughout this recruiting cycle and in the 2025 cycle. I'll ask them about, certain schools and stuff like that. And whatever, they say they want to be wanted. So you know what? Like, that's what you got to do, whatever. So I don't know, man.
Well,
like I said at the beginning of the show, it's not as bad as it seems, and that's true. But also with the defensive line, it is an issue.
It's an issue, Matt. If you went into signing day and said, okay, both of these guys are going to come back, JT and Jack, and you're going to sign a 5-star edge rusher and a flyer edge rusher. You don't need a defensive tackle because you're going to the transfer portal to get one. You would have said, okay, sounds good. If you had no other context for the recruiting class, if you only paid attention to recruiting on December 20th, 2023, you would be through the roof excited about what is coming to Ohio State on the defensive line. But I just scribbled down on a sticky note the potential defensive line class that they were on pace to sign at one point. And what, honestly, we projected. I think there's a story on lettermenrow.com with these guys all projected in the class. Edric Houston, Eric Mensah, Justin Scott, Dylan Stewart, and Marquise Lightfoot. Marquise Lightfoot, swing guy, could probably play 3-tech if you added some weight to him. Edric Houston could probably play 3-tech if you added some weight to him. Dylan Stewart, true defensive end, get after the passer, defensive end, edge guy. Eric Mensah, the perfect 3-star defensive end that would complement all of those guys. And you would probably be talking about his upside instead of this is all they settled for. Yep. If this was the defensive line class. And Justin Scott, a true game-wrecking defensive tackle from the Midwest that should have been a slam dunk. Now, all of those recruitments are different. All of them. And if you think, I know that Alabama was selling Edric Houston on cultural issues at Ohio State, and Ohio State got those things figured out. But if you think that there's a single program, Toledo could be recruiting against Ohio State and use Larry Johnson's age as a negative recruiting. Teams have been doing it since Dabo Swinney did it with, was it Lawrence, Dexter Lawrence? Like the teams have been doing this with Larry Johnson since he was 62. He's now 72. So it is a thing on the recruiting trail. And like, this is why I'm doing this, because I know Alabama used a different way, but they also talked about Larry Johnson's age. So all of these guys have different recruitments. But when the class is supposed to look like this, and instead it just looks like this, it's disappointing. Yeah. And that's the bottom line. It's not a disaster if you just look at it on December 20th, 2023. It's a disaster if you look at it from December 20th, 2022 to December 20th, 2023. And that is the biggest difference here is expectation versus reality. Reality smacked Ohio State yesterday in defensive line recruiting.
Yeah. I mean, they say Ohio State says the standard is the standard. And by my estimation, I don't think the standard is being upheld. It's not.
You know, the question was, what do you look for in assistant coaches to Ryan Day yesterday?
Yeah.
This is the answer. The number one thing.
Recruiting. That's what it is.
You have to recruit the best players in the country and be the best position group in the country. Next year, if all those guys return, Ohio State could have the best defensive line in the country. 2025, I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah. But don't worry, the next 365 days I will be. So don't worry.
Well, Matt, is there anything else? I mean, you're the guy here. I'm just trying to host and help this show along. Is there anything else defensive line wise that's worth discussing other than just like, hey, it wasn't good enough?
I mean, at some point it turns into a good critical conversation to stomping your feet in the ground and weighing and looking like the scarlet tinted fellas, the scarlet tinted glasses fellas. And I don't want that. So let's move on. I feel like we covered the defense pretty well. Oh, except two fellas by the name of Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover, who signed their letters of intent yesterday. Not only are they really good football players, but they're great people. I'm fortunate to build a relationship with both of those guys throughout their recruiting process, and they're really good at football, man. Like they're just really good at football. All they want to do is show up to the Woody in January, which both of them will be, and they want to work out, they want to learn the playbook, and then they want to go hit people. And I think that's good for Ohio State. It gives Ohio State's linebacker room a little more depth, which is good, I would say, even though two can only play at one time, given the current scheme. You still need depth at every position. It's looking like, Cody Simon has announced that he will return, which is super big from a veteran standpoint. You like to have a veteran in the room. A lot of expectation for CJ Hicks going into 2024. I don't, unless I missed it, I don't think Tommy Eichenberg or Steel Chambers have announced if they're going to play in the Cotton Bowl or not. If they do, I think Ohio State would be wise to play them maybe, a couple of series, maybe a quarter or whatever. I think at some point Ohio State has to let the young guys loose if the old guys come back that have NFL decisions, namely CJ Hicks. Like it's time. It's time to see what he can do when he is given a full 60 minutes. And this is the perfect opportunity for that, in my opinion. So you have Gabe Powers coming back. Reed Carrico was in the transfer portal going to West Virginia, which I think is a great fit for him, by the way. I think that's a great fit for him. And then you have, Arvell Reese. Is he going to be a defensive end? Is he going to be a linebacker? I had someone at the Woody tell me that they're very excited for him at linebacker, but then you hear elsewhere he's going to be defensive end. So trying to figure that out. We'll see what happens. I think he'd be great at both spots, however. Dude can play football. He's certainly physical enough to play defensive line. And then you have Nigel Glover, the transfer from Northwestern at the start of the 2023 season. And then you got Peyton Pierce and Garrett Stover. So, which this is just something that has been at the back of my mind about Garrett Stover. He started his high school career as a safety, and he has the closing speed to play in the back end. Is that something that Ohio State wants to play with? I don't think so. This is purely me thinking out loud. That's all. I don't want this to be something that Ohio State is thinking about this. This is me thinking about if Ohio State is going to think about it. I want that clarity here. He has the safety speed. He's a linebacker that ran a 4.4 at Ohio State camp going into his senior season at 210. It's pretty fast, Yeah,
he's a freak athlete.
He is. He is a freak athlete. And he's, like I said, he's pretty good at the football. So I'd be intrigued. If they're, Perry Eliano was heavily involved in that recruitment, along with Ryan Day and, Jim Knowles and James Laurinaitis. So that's just a thought I have in the back of my head about the young Stover, cousin of Cade Stover, as everyone knows. So I don't know. Just thinking out loud. That's all.
I think these are your two favorite players in this entire class, Garrett Stover and Peyton Pierce. Just two linebackers who want to rip people's heads off, but also are pretty athletic. I think Peyton Pierce is the most underrated guy in this class, the most non-talked about. Well, no, he's the second most underrated guy in this class behind Mylan Graham.
A 5-star wide receiver, yeah.
Because
I agree with you, though. Completely agree.
Mylan Graham is a 5-star wide receiver who gets talked about less than Brandon Ennis got talked about last year, because he just gets overshadowed. He just gets overshadowed because there's a guy who's an all-world prospect and over top of him.
They call it a generational prospect, I believe.
Yeah, but I think Peyton Pierce, just a quiet guy, not really.
And he had 180 something tackles his senior year playing in Dallas, Texas, in the Dallas Fort Worth area. That's a lot of football to be played, and secondly, he just knows the game. These are two guys that Ohio State is very excited to coach and develop. So I'm excited to see how it goes for him.
I think Peyton Pierce is the future captain at Ohio State. I think you're going to see his name on the wall at some point.
He has the potential. He has the potential for sure. For that. Yeah.
Before we get out of here, Matt, there's one position that we just completely glossed over. Well, I guess two positions, but one spot on the field. We talked about offensive line. We've talked wide receiver. We've talked defensive line, linebacker, back end in the defense.
The whole shebang back there, yeah, for sure.
Oh, by the way, Ohio State signed one of the best overall prospects in the state of Georgia who happens to play quarterback.
Yeah.
We get to the hour and 4-minute mark, and we haven't said a word
Sweet
about
name too, by the way.
We haven't said a word about the lefty himself, Aaron Nolan, closing in on that 5th star. One of the best, like I said, prospects in the Peach State. Played at a powerhouse in the Peach State. State championships in the state of Georgia. Athletic. He leans on his accuracy. He's a little bit of a risk taker with the football because he knows how accurate he is. A little bit of that, if you turn on the tape and you watch the righty from the class of 2020, you watch the lefty from the class of 2024. I think if you flipped him to a righty, you would see a little bit of CJ Stroud in the high school tape, not in the CJ Stroud in the Peach Bowl against Georgia tape, but CJ Stroud as a high school kid. Like, you're going to see some parallels there. And I really, really like what Ohio State did and its ability to pivot from Dylan Raiola's decommitment, not rest on that, not get down on that, instead get back to work, go find a quarterback, and end up with a player who I think has a chance to be really special for the Buckeyes.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State wasted no time after, the Raiola decision, which I think that worked out for Ohio State, given how that all played out for Georgia, given, moving down the stretch there, signed with Nebraska after being committed to Georgia for, I don't know, however long. But yeah, Ayer's a real special dude. You're right. And I made this point yesterday in our video when we were done at the hour and a half Ryan Day press conference with 2 intermissions. Should have gotten some popcorn while we were there. Aaron Noland is special because he has a lot of traits that show up on film that Ohio State saw when they were recruiting CJ Stroud. The accuracy that he has as a high school quarterback is ridiculous. I was fortunate enough to see Air compete at the Elite 11 in Los Angeles this past summer. And you would have been, I think Julian Sayin, who signed with Alabama, was the only other quarterback that was that accurate throughout the 3 days of competition. And he's certainly going to be able to go to Ohio State in January and make some noise with that quarterback competition, because there's another one on deck for Ohio State, unless like Devin Brown really, really runs away with the job against Missouri in the Cotton Bowl. But I don't know. I still think there would be room for a competition. But he's a winner. Went 15-0 his junior year, won a Class 6A championship in Georgia, which is very, very good high school ball. Has a lot of familiarity with the guys that are at Ohio State, especially Jelani Thurman, the tight end, because they were teammates at Langston Hughes in Georgia. That's the quarterback that Jeremiah Smith wanted, which that matters a lot. Like, that matters a lot. And it was really cool watching those two actually at the Elite 11, like really chop it up and like get to talk to each other. The same with Mylan Graham, because he was one of the wide receivers that was there catching passes from the quarterbacks. Those 3 were all pretty tight knit already, and that was in June. And now it's December. All 3 have signed their letters of intent. 2 of the 3 are going to be on campus in January. Mylan Graham is the only one of those 3 that isn't going to be an early enrollee. So Ayer's a special talent. Ohio State's really excited about him. And that was a recruitment where you look back on it and like Ohio State was always going to get him. Like looking back on it at the time, I wasn't sure like what was going to happen with it. And then, a couple of days before he announced his commitment, I was like, okay, like the Buckeyes are going to get this guy. But looking back on it now, he was always going to go to Ohio State. Seeing the opportunity to be coached by Ryan Day and Corey Dennis and Todd Fitch and Brian Hartline and having all of those weapons at his disposal, like who wouldn't want to do that if you're a high level quarterback prospect, right? So that's that. And then you look at 2025 and Ohio State that's already taken care of. You got a guy 40 minutes up the road with Tavian St. Clair who has blossomed into one of the best high school quarterback prospects in the country. So quarterback position continues to roll for the Buckeyes. That's for sure.
Matt, you want to talk about a guy who's completely bought into the Ohio State culture already before he even gets on campus? That's Aaron Nolan.
Yeah.
The right after the Ohio State lost to Michigan on November 25th, Aaron Nolan says January. He's excited for January to get there, get to work. You talk about a guy who has been pushing for guys behind the scenes, been pushing for guys on social media, who's been can't wait to be a Buckeye, can't wait to do this. Let's get to work, class of 2024.
Yeah.
A leader in every sense of the word. Another guy, along with, like I said, Peyton Pierce, who I could just – you tell me this guy's a captain in 3 years, I would completely believe you. And I'm really excited to see what Ryan Day does with Aaron Nolan. I think that, it's going to be a little bit of a shift. He's going to have to teach a lefty, which doesn't sound like it's all that hard. Quarterback is quarterback, but Ryan Day's a footwork. Ryan Day's a big footwork guy. Every time he talks about Kyle McCord and his progression this year, it was when his footwork's good, he's good. Ryan Day loves to talk about footwork. Well, now you've got to completely flip-flop that for one specific guy. And so I think that there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve even for Ryan Day and for Aaron Nolan, just trying to get on the same page with that. I could definitely see this being a very good thing for Ohio State. Yesterday could be a banner day, almost like when we look back at the 2020 class when CJ Stroud signed, saying, okay, this was a moment that helped Ohio State get to some good highs with the guy who has a chance to be a really good, not only college player, but NFL player. I think Aaron Nolan is a guy to watch, to know. And, I put it in the 5 Buckeyes who could have an instant impact. I don't expect Aaron Nolan to start as a true freshman, but he's going to come in because of how competitive he is and how competitive you have shared that he is. And the other people on the recruiting trail, not just in the Ohio State market, but down in Georgia, all the folks that are on 3 down there. He's the kind of competitor that's going to make Devin Brown and Lincoln Keenholz better, even when he's a true freshman.
And that's a good thing. That is a good thing. And that's the kind of thing that any program wants. They want guys to push each other. That's what you should want. Fans should want that. I thought it was perfect. And so many, the staying power of Devin Brown's tweet of the burning boats photo has so much staying power in the short term and in the long term, talking about just staying there. And we heard Devin talk, what was that, last week? Talk about how he wants to be at Ohio State. He went to Ohio State and chose Ohio State because of the competition and stuff like that. And when you bring in more guys like that, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So I'm real excited about all 20 of these guys to get to Ohio State. I'm real excited about what they're going to do at Ohio State when all 20 of them are there. I think the count is 15 or 16 are going to be early enrollees off the top of my head. I was trying to do the quick math there, but as longtime viewers of the Lettermen Lounge know, not a math show, not a math show. I had a story about who the early enrollees are a couple weeks ago. I'll rehash it up, send it back out there. I'm sure someone will let me know if I'm wrong about it, but whatever, it's fine. Be holly and jolly, folks. Ohio State got all the people it needed, or rather, now let me rephrase this, because it didn't get all the people it needed. That's for sure. Ohio State got the guys that wanted to be at Ohio State, and when you get that, that's a good thing. So, I'm not trying to blow smoke up anyone, but at some point you have to take a step back from the pitchforks and torches and be like, you know what? Okay, these are the guys that are going to be here. Let's root for them. Let's root for their success. And I think that's kind of where things need to start turning. Because you felt it yesterday. You felt it when Ryan Day came back into his press conference after getting off the phone with Edric Houston. I'm actually kind of really glad that I got the first question after that. And it was just, was that phone call from Buford, Georgia by chance? And him being a human being, Ryan Day being a human being, I think is a very good thing for Ohio State. And I think more of that needs to be seen, quite honestly. Not the, being a human doesn't have to be just the tirade on the sideline against Georgia the entire time, but that was very good too, I will say. Having moments like that, like he did yesterday at his press conference, but you could just feel it, right? when Jeremiah announced that he was going to sign, and then when Edric actually did sign, there was just that different feeling. Like things got lighter for everyone in the Woody when those things happen, and when things like that happen, it leads to other things. Like that's just a fact of life. Like you have one good thing happen, there's a snowball effect, you know. So is that me being an optimist? Which I mean, you've known me for 8 years, 7, 8 years. I'm not exactly the most optimistic person, so I don't know. There's a conversation to be had for sure. And I'm going to choose to look at it that way because living in a life of negativity is not good. It's not healthy either. So,
Matt,
that's
you need a last second Christmas gift?
oh, of course I do.
I'd go to the Game Time app, use the promo code Buckeyes, and get $20 off your first purchase of tickets to the Columbus Blue Jackets, to the Ohio State football program next year, to the Ohio State hoops team. Seems to be doing better than maybe we expected them to do this year. So if you
Not
go
about
to
it.
the yeah,
Sorry.
if you go to the Game Time app, gametime.co, use the promo code Buckeyes, you get $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app of tickets, any tickets you need. They also do this thing where if you find a ticket on the Game Time app and then you find a cheaper ticket on a competing ticketing website, you send it back to Game Time, they give you 110% the difference. So you're making a little bit of money there. You're saving a lot of money with the Game Time app. Game Time app, gametime.co. Use the promo code Buckeyes for $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app or at gametime.co. Of course, terms apply, but go to Game Time. Go to the Game Time app. Go to gametime.co. Use that promo code Buckeyes, and you get $20 off your first purchase of any tickets your little heart desires. If you need a last-second Christmas gift, get them on the Game Time app. Use the promo code Buckeyes. You save $20. Matt, before we get out of here,
Yeah.
you said Ohio State got all the people it wanted. I think it got the peoples it wanted because the Buckeyes are going to wrap things up with running back. We didn't talk about this, but if Travion Henderson returns, I don't know if this running back group has a lot of concern about 2024, but the future of the running back position is definitely bright with James Peoples, with Sam Williams-Dixon. Could have been brighter with Jordan Lyle, but he's off to Miami doing whatever he wants to do in South Florida. And Ohio State signs two good players it's really excited about. So let's talk about running back, Matt, starting with actually, let's start with Sam Williams-Dixon because I think the headliner there is James Peoples, and it's easy to overlook Sam Williams-Dixon. But I think he's a really good player who could have a unique role in the Ohio State offense.
I mean, he can do it all, man. I saw Sam play against Pickerington Central. That's who it was.
You better not get one of the Pickeringtons wrong.
No, I know, because he went to Pick North, so I had to remember who they played.
His Twitter handle's right there, folks. If you got it right there. If you got it wrong.
Yeah, let me know.
Pickerington folks do not mess around. You get a Pickerington name wrong, they are going to let you know.
Well, hey, there you go.
I've done it before. I've been a victim.
No, I know. It was it was the Pick Central game, and that was by all accounts, very good football game. I mean, can do it all, man. Like he can do just. It's not that he can do a little bit of everything well. It's that he does everything great, right? Like this is a kid who is originally from Columbus, moved to West Holmes, and then relocated back to Pickerington, and because of maybe some bogus transfer rules, he didn't get to finish out his senior season. He only played in the first 5 games of his senior season. But I mean, he's really good, man. Like that's I know that's like not the expert analysis that people were hoping for, but like that's just what he is. Like he's really good. He can run when the ball is in his hands and he lines up in the backfield. You know, he's very good as a running back. He's very solid as a pass catcher. He lined up in the slot a few times this past fall for Pick North, who has very good wide receivers as well. You know, they got some low P5 guys, high group of 5 guys playing wide receiver for him as well. I just think he's a guy that is I feel like he's overlooked because he doesn't have like the one like super like thing, like the one dominant trait. Like for James Peoples, it's the fact that his like people can let me slow down for a second. I'm getting all fired up here. His player comp by a lot of people has been J.K. Dobbins. And the things that J.K. Dobbins did well, you know, put his foot in the ground, run people over. Like that's how people remember J.K. Dobbins. You know, he's elusive. He can do all of those things. That's the same vision for James Peoples. But with Sam Williams-Dixon, he's like a Swiss Army knife, man. You can put him in different spots in this Ohio State offense. And when Ohio State has guys like that, that's when Ohio State's at its most dangerous. It's when it has guys that it can just put in different spots and make mismatched nightmares for opposing defenses. It's the guy I think Ohio State fans should be really excited for. And Ryan Day said as much in his press conference yesterday when he said that he's counting on and expecting both of those guys to make an impact as freshmen. Like, that's a big deal. So really excited about Sam to get to campus, and he's really excited to get to campus as well. Ryan said that that Sam has been at bowl practices, just soaking up as much as he can before he gets there. And props to him for taking advantage of that. Only living 20 minutes away from the Woody, like props to him for that, for doing that. And then you have James Peoples, who was always the top priority running back for Tony Alford in the 2024 cycle. And I know a lot of people are going to want to talk about Jordan Marshall, and rightfully so. I think Jordan Marshall is a fantastic running back. I think he would have been wildly successful at Ohio State. And I think if Ohio State had gotten both Jordan Marshall and James Peoples, that would have just been the best running back class in the 2024 cycle. No doubt about it. But the fact is, Ohio State got in on Jordan late, and Mike Hart in Michigan did not. They went down to Cincinnati and took away one of the best players in the state, and he's now going to Michigan. So, we're not going to sit here and talk about spilt milk. We're going to talk about what's heading to Columbus. And that's the number one running back on Ohio State's board, which was James Peoples. Like, that's the reality of the situation. He missed some time in his senior season because of an injury, but he is back. He is healthy. He got to finish out his senior season. And even in not a full season, he ran for over 1,000 yards. So, like, that's in San Antonio, Texas. He's playing high school ball in Texas, running for over 1,000 yards in a shortened season. He's a real special player. Can really just put his foot in the ground, put his head down, and just run the ball. Like, he is super good. The thing that I love most about his game is the cuts at the second level. Like, that to me, it's not Travion Henderson-esque, because what Trey does with the cuts and the field vision is like something else entirely. But James's level of it, James Peoples' level of that as a high school football player is something to be admired. And I think that's something that Ohio State fans get to see. I mean, I hope they get to see it early, because he's just a very talented guy. And then you said this with Air, but James is one of those guys that like already cares so much about Ohio State. And that's important. Like, to have guys that aren't even in the program yet, care so much about the program. That's what makes Ohio State different than a lot of places in college football. And even though college football isn't, what it used to be, and a lot of things about the sport have changed, it's still an awesome sport. People still watch it. Ohio State was like the second most watched team in college football. People still care about it. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here talking about it. We wouldn't have people in the comments talking to us about it. Like, college football is a good thing, man. Maybe it's not in the best place, but college football is great. And it's nice to be able to sit here and talk about kids who care about Ohio State that are going to Ohio State. And they're also very good at football.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys in this class who are not from Ohio who have really like ingratiated themselves and kind of bathed in scarlet and gray since they committed. James Peoples, Aaron Nolan, Peyton Pierce, Jalen McClain, Ian Moore. Ian Moore, his dream school was not Ohio State, because there were a couple in-state schools that maybe should have recruited Ian Moore, if we're being honest, and didn't. And Justin Fry saw him early and got on there.
That's why we love June, man. Those recruiting camps, gotta love them.
Yeah, by and large, Matt, we're going to get out of here pretty quickly. I think this is it's the number 3 class in America. So, like, it's a really good class. It just is. There were
Yeah.
some holes that needed to be filled that maybe Ohio
Big
State
hole.
didn't do the best job of. But there are a lot of things about this class you're going to look out on the field in the 2025 and 2026 season and say, oh man, that 2024 recruiting class. I think this is a class that is going to get overlooked by some people because of what it didn't accomplish, but it's going to be a very big part of it's dumb to say, it sounds obvious. It's going to be a big part of the future of Ohio State, but like, look at the 2022 class right now after 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those guys have hit the road. Look at the 2020 class. Some of those guys panned out. Some of them hit the road. I think the 2021 class is just special. But the 2024 class, I think, has a chance to really cement itself as one of those really good Ohio State, just like solid program building classes that is going to help them, get back to the Big Ten championship game, get back to the college football playoff, compete for national titles.
And the thing is, with how raw and talented this 24 class is, if that 21 class, if a good bulk of that 21 class with NFL decisions decides to come back, that's going to be so important for all 20 of these guys that are coming in, because they get to be around those guys. And when you're bookended by arguably the two best recruiting classes that Ryan Day has brought in, definitely that 21 class, but the 24 class, when your program is bookended by that, and then they get to go like this, that's going to be a special thing for Ohio State. It has the potential to be a very special thing for Ohio State. And I can't wait to see what happens. Like, I can't wait to see how it all pans out. And that's why covering recruiting is fun, because it's all about seeing these guys go from high school football players to being Ohio State Buckeyes. And like, that's fun. That is genuinely fun.
Yeah, I like this class. It gets a seal of approval from Lettermen Row.
Yeah.
And that's where
those position group grades are going to be coming out, and some of them are going to be tough, but some of them are going to be, I think, pretty good. So,
yeah. Matt, this is the longest live show Lettermen Row has ever done, 1 hour and 27 minutes now. But I think we got a lot accomplished. I think there's a lot to look back on. There's going to be some freezing cold takes that come out of this in 2 or 3 years. There's going to be some scorching hot takes that come out of this in a few years that look really good. We're going to look like idiots. We're going to look like geniuses. We're going to look like recruiting guys, because that's what recruiting is. You project, and then if you're wrong, you're wrong. That's what it is. So,
hey, if I'm right, let me know. If I'm wrong, keep it to yourself, right? That's how it works, right?
Yeah. View this as a double episode, because we're going to take next week off as you have some time off. We'll get back to it the first week of January, where I think we're probably just going to go like a way too early look at everything in the 2025 class. We might have to do another long episode at that point. But
I mean, that first week of there are commitments on tap, man. There are commitments scheduled. Ohio State might be getting good news to start the new year. So there's a lot to talk about as it pertains to the 2025 cycle. And there's a lot to talk about this 2024 class, but we're going to be doing all of that at lettermenrow.com, and I'm super pumped.
Yep. If you're watching live, you can still get lettermenrow.com $1 for a month or $54.99 for a year. That's less than $5 a month until the end of today. It's a hell of a deal. Go get it right now. Lettermenrow.com is on sale through the rest of Thursday. If you're a member already, we'll see you over at the Lettermen Lounge. Everybody, go have a cup of kindness yet for the new year. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. Make it merry and bright. Matt Parker and I are going to do exactly that. Then I will head down to DFW for the Cotton Bowl. We're only a few days away from the Cotton Bowl. 1 week from tomorrow, Ohio State and Missouri in that Cotton Bowl. The Buckeyes putting to rest the 2024 recruiting class, signing a good batch of Buckeyes. We just talked about it all. If you missed any of it, go back and watch that. For Matt Parker on the other side of that screen, I am Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Lettermen Lounge. We'll see you guys after the new year. Have a good new year. We'll see you over at lettermenrow.com.